Good morning, everyone. I wrote this down, so I'm going to read it to make sure that I can stay within my time frame. My name is Sunshine Clemons. My pronouns are she and her. I am a Black woman with medium-length dark brown hair wearing a Black Lives Matter t-shirt with a denim jacket covered in buttons over it. I'm one of the organizers of our local Black Lives Matter chapter. And when I hear the word reparations, my first thought is an effort to repair generational trauma caused by the enslavement of Africans brought here by violent force. As part of my work with Black Lives Matter Springfield, I had the honor of visiting Africa earlier this year for the first time on an exploratory trip to learn about the slave trade there. I spent 10 days in Ghana with Dr. Lisa Johnson, who spoke earlier. The things I learned there still haunt me 8 months later. We all know the true history of slavery is not taught, but what I learned there has changed me. The fact that our history is not taught well here was solidified during my trip to Africa. I learned of an evil hidden away and not discussed or taught at the necessary levels here in America. We toured slave castles, which really should be called slave dungeons because my people were not living in a castle. We learned the slave traders built their churches on top of the dungeons where the enslaved were chained beneath, and they incorporated the sounds of their wailing into the worship service. We stood in the cells with only enough air from a small window to keep the enslaved alive. In those same cells, we stood on the human decomposition of our ancestors. Just 3 weeks ago, I visited Montgomery, Alabama, which was also mentioned today as part of a Journeys to Justice project to visit the Equal Justice Initiative legacy sites. While there, I learned more about the history of racial terror and lynching that happened across this country to Black people for everything from seeking freedom to protesting low wages at work. These acts of violence and racial terror have become written in our DNA. According to the National Library of Medicine and many other reputable sources, Dr. Joy DeGruy developed a theory called post-traumatic slave syndrome, or PTSS. This theory explains the set of causes of many of the adaptive survival behaviors in African American communities throughout the United States and the diaspora. PTSS is a condition that exists as a consequence of the trauma of multi-generational oppression of Africans and their descendants, resulting from centuries of chattel slavery. This is why reparations are required. Reparations are vital to the restoration and preservation of African American neighborhoods and communities. It can help us build necessities like vocational centers for the descendants of chattel slaves and the public recognition and apology. Because an apology and changed behavior is absolutely necessary and it is deserved. You cannot understand the system of chattel slavery and the white supremacist systems that it birthed that still operate today and think it is not deserved. That combination can help with the emotional healing, open doors to better education of our histories so that we better know who we are. Reparations come in many forms, such as restitution, compensation, rehabilitation, and a guarantee of non-recurrence. All of these are needed and required for true progress and restorative justice. Thank you.
Good morning. I am awed by the ladies that spoke before me, and I don't know if I can reach the same level, but I'm gonna give it a shot. First of all, my name is Frank McNeil, born and raised in High Point, North Carolina. And if you've never been to North Carolina, they call it the furniture capital of the world. Now, we were talking, one of the ladies talked about they had never had a Black teacher. Well, I am a child of segregation. My first and formal education from first grade through high school was in a segregated school system. And if you understand a segregated school system, you were supposed to learn, but you were at disadvantage. This was separate but equal. I think that terminology came from the court. Separate but equal. That's what we had to be. Nothing about separate and equal was equal. It was separate, and we were separated for as the ladies have explained, there was a reason why we were separated, because we weren't supposed to be able to understand, to learn, to be able to achieve. But let me get to the core of the matter, and that's political disenfranchisement. And it starts with education. That's the founding, the building block of disenfranchisement. Because if you never know that you've been disenfranchised, how do you understand what's happening to you? So, long story, graduated high school, went to an HBCU, NCCU, North Carolina Central University, in Durham, North Carolina, and had my first white teacher in 1968. My first white teacher was 1968. Everything I learned up until that point was by black teachers. And now that I look back on my education that I got through that segregated school, I am so happy. I am so happy because these were great educators. These were great people. And as I went back and started looking at their backgrounds, even during the late 40s and 50s and 60s, these people were going to Columbia, Harvard, but they couldn't get a job other than in a black school system. And so we had the best teachers. Now I realized that. We had the best teachers because these people were brilliant, and not only that, they demanded us to understand who we were and where we came from and what we should be trying to accomplish. So let me get to the real thing. Got to talk about the Voting Rights Act and why are we in this political morass that we see ourselves in today? Well, 1965 Voting Rights Act broke down the barriers, as everybody knows, to the disenfranchisement that had been going on for many years. However, one of the things that has happened is now you're seeing the slow and not so slow taking back. They're taking back what we fought so hard to get. They're taking it back because John Roberts, our Supreme Court Justice, who is the head of the Supreme Court, in 2013, in Shelby County versus Holder, he removed Section 4. They found that Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act was unconstitutional. And what Section 4 did, let's understand what Section 4 did, is that the Supreme Court had knocked down, and under the Voting Rights Act, the Supreme Court said when local jurisdictions, that's state and county governments, institute a process that limits African Americans' opportunity to vote, that they had to be, it's called pre-clearance. They had to go to Supreme, that challenging, that if you challenge that, the Supreme Court has said, no, this is discriminatory, this is anti-voting, and therefore the Supreme Court or the courts, federal courts, could say states could not do these things. Well, John Roberts said, because of the movement and how much we had achieved, we don't have to have Section 4 anymore. And as soon as Section 4 was found to be unconstitutional, Alabama was the first state. Shelby County is in Alabama. Alabama was the first state that instituted prohibitions for certain local things that they could do that didn't have to have pre-clearance anymore. So now you have to start a whole new lawsuit to try to say this is unconstitutional. So that's just one of the things that's going on. The DEI controversy is fake. Let's just tell, the DEI controversy is fake. It has nothing to do with people getting an advantage. Are you serious? An advantage to what? We compete on the same level. We take the same standardized tests. We do all of the things that everybody else does. And then when you get to a certain point in life, affirmative action never said you could hire an unqualified person. Never. Never. Affirmative action said that you had to consider people with qualifications for that position. You had to have the qualifications for the position. It wasn't about you getting a job that you weren't qualified. You had to have the requisite qualifications. So all of the Ron DeSantis and the people who are running around and some of the most ignorant people in Congress that you can find are talking about DEI. And then you have to question, what in the world, who are they talking to? And then we get to, of course, reapportionment or disproportionate. I'll put it that way, it's disproportionate. Because these people are drawing lines in districts where they can get elected and they don't have the impact. And I'm not saying that every district's got to be a black district, but they draw it in such a way that black population does not have what we call influence, the influence to influence that race. And see, when they have to appeal to other than the racist element in their district, it might be a different outcome. But instead, this is now our new fight. We got a new fight. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act, and we have some people that look like us that have voted against the John, and we have a Supreme Court justice that look like us that voted against. So that is a product of the miseducation of those individuals. And so that's why, again, back to education is so important. Now, getting to Springfield for a minute here. Boy. Woo boy. Coming from North Carolina in 1974 to Springfield and thinking that I was coming to the most progressive place, because, you read about Lincoln and freeing of the slaves, and, you go through all of that. And I got off the plane and got here, and I started looking at Springfield in the context of High Point. And all of a sudden, I saw some real red flags real quick. And as I started moving around and learning a few things around, I said, what in the world is going on? I thought I left the South, is what I said to myself. I thought I left the South. And as we sometimes down south call this up south. And boy, was it up south here. And no disrespect to people from Springfield. No disrespect. But what I found is that they had been, if you want to say, captured in their education and their upbringing, that they They were indoctrinated to believe that this was good here. And I talked to people who were much older than I and said, well, we had integrated schools when I was growing up. Well, blacks sat on one side of the classroom and whites sat on the other. How is that integrated? You're in the same classroom, but you can't intermingle. You can't use your head to talk to people. And then the ugly history of Springfield began to unravel. You had a beach blacks couldn't go to. You had a swimming pool blacks couldn't swim in. I'm saying the same thing I had when I was home. It was nothing different. It was only the mindset that was different. And so here's a troublemaker come into town, because I was called a troublemaker, of course. And I said, well, guys, we can do something about this. There's a process in which we can do something about the disenfranchisement. There was what they call a commission form of government here. And when I attacked the commission form of government, the 5 commissioners, if we broke it down into wards like we have today, the 5 commissioners lived in one ward. I'm sorry, I'm gonna get through to you. The 5 commissioners lived in one ward. And what we have under Section 2 of the Voting Rights, which we sued the city of Springfield to change form of government, was vote dilution. And basically we were saying, if given the opportunity to draw wards, to draw maps and draw wards, that African Americans could make up one of the wards of the city, give us representation. And thank God we were successful. We still have a long way to go, but there's a lot that we can do. But the education, let me get back to that. The political disenfranchisement starts with the education. And if you don't believe that you can accomplish something, you taught that you can't accomplish something, you never believe that you can accomplish it. So thank you very much. And sorry, I wish I could go longer, but I'm going to stay in with the time list.